Take a look at this image. What do you see? Two faces? Or a vase? Or perhaps you remember the famous dress that divided the internet. Some saw it as blue and black, others as white and gold. How is that possible? After all, it's the same image. Can our eyes really deceive us? These examples are just the tip of the iceberg. Every day, our senses process millions of signals. But here's the thing. The brain doesn't just record reality. It creates it. It adds details, fills in gaps, changes colors, and that raises a question. What if the reality we see is not reality at all, but only a projection of it? When you look at the world around you, your brain acts as a sophisticated editor. It decides what to show and what to leave out. And this brings us to one of the most fascinating ideas. We never truly see the world as it is. We only see what our brain lets us see. Visual deception exists not just for humans. In nature, it's a matter of survival. Why does a predator mistake a poisonous butterfly for a leaf? Why does a chameleon become invisible? Perception is a tool, not a reflection of the truth. Today, we embark on a journey through the world of illusions and perception. From scientific explanations to philosophical musings, let's explore together. Do we see the world as it is, or only as a reflection of it? Our senses are the gateways to the world. Eyes capture light, ears perceive sound waves, and skin feels textures. But the reality we perceive passes through multiple filters. Our senses merely collect raw data, and it's the brain that constructs the final version of the world we experience. Imagine how a camera records light, or a microphone captures sound. Our sensory organs work similarly, but they don't give us direct access to the world. Instead, they send raw signals to the brain for processing. But the brain doesn't just replicate reality as it is, it interprets it. These perceptual filters, developed over millions of years of evolution, help us focus on what's important while ignoring distractions. Yet, they also make perception inherently subjective. When light hits the retina in your eyes, it's converted into electrical signals that travel to the brain. But the brain doesn't just take a snapshot like a camera. It decides what's important and what isn't. It fills in missing details, interprets colors, and even distorts reality at times. Every second, your eyes take in an overwhelming amount of information, but your brain can process only a fraction of it. Why? Because it has limited resources. Instead of capturing everything, it prioritizes movement, faces, and vibrant colors. But these priorities are subjective. For instance, in dim light, your brain might interpret a gray object as black to enhance contrast, making objects easier to distinguish. Look at this incomplete circle. Why does your brain automatically complete it? Because it's searching for patterns. Our minds are wired to create a coherent picture, even when parts of that picture are missing. This ability is called closure. It helps us quickly make sense of our surroundings. For instance, if you see parts of a camouflaged predator, your brain might fill in the gaps to identify it. But it can also mislead us, making us see things that aren't there. These illusions reveal that we don't perceive the world as it is, but as a reconstruction. Here's another example. Look at these two lines. Which one looks longer? In reality, they're the same size, but their context makes your brain perceive them differently. Why does it happen? Because your brain interprets objects relative to their surroundings. This phenomenon is common in everyday life. Think about advertisements. Larger text feels more important than smaller text. Or on the road, an object surrounded by motion might seem closer than it actually is. Context controls what we perceive. The brain's ability to filter information is both its power and its constraint. It allows us to focus on what matters, but also creates blind spots. We don't see the world objectively. We see only our interpretation of it. It's an illusion, crafted by billions of neurons. Perceptual illusions are a window into how our brain operates. They reveal that the reality we see isn't objective. Our brain is a powerful processing machine, but in its effort to create a coherent picture, it often adds or alters details that don't actually exist. Take the Ponzo illusion. Here, two lines of the same length appear different in size because of the perspective. Why does this happen? Our brain uses its understanding of the real world to interpret the image. In life, parallel lines like train tracks converge in the distance. So, the upper line seems farther away, and the brain perceives it as longer. Motion illusions are another example of how the brain fills in gaps. These stationary images create the illusion of movement through the contrast of lines and colors. Our brains evolved to detect motion quickly, whether it's a predator or prey. But when data is ambiguous, the brain makes assumptions. That's why we perceive motion in still images, even though it's not real. Sometimes, the brain encounters the impossible. The Penrose stairs, for instance, appear to rise and fall endlessly, but when we try to visualize them in three-dimensional space, it becomes clear that they're impossible. Our brain is tricked by its attempt to reconcile contradictory information into a single, unified perception. Another fascinating phenomenon is the brightness illusion. When we see two identical gray squares on different backgrounds, one seems darker or lighter than the other. The brain interprets colors not in isolation, but in relation to the surrounding context. This helps us navigate shadows and bright light, but can also mislead us. Every illusion demonstrates how the brain simplifies the complexity of the world around us. We don't perceive objects as they are, but interpret them through the lens of experience, context, and biological constraints. These mechanisms enhance survival, but also create false impressions. Our perception of reality isn't just limited by our senses. The way we interpret and process information is also riddled with errors. These errors, known as cognitive biases, influence everything from simple choices to complex worldviews. For example, when choosing a product in a store, you might prefer the one that looks more expensive, assuming it's of higher quality, even if there's no difference. This is known as the halo effect, our tendency to judge something based on one prominent characteristic. Or consider the illusion of correlation. We often link events that are unrelated. For instance, if you notice you're always late to work on rainy days, you might assume the rain is to blame, even if it's just a coincidence. Another common bias is the fundamental attribution error. When someone cuts you off in traffic, you're likely to think they're careless or aggressive. But when you break a rule yourself, you attribute it to circumstances. Maybe you were in a hurry or distracted. We tend to judge others more harshly than we judge ourselves. Then there's the Dunning-Kruger effect. People with limited knowledge in a field often overestimate their abilities. For example, a beginner programmer might believe they've mastered the basics, only to realize the depth of the subject later. On the other hand, experts tend to underestimate their skills, assuming everyone knows this. Cognitive biases are amplified in social situations. We're prone to agree with the majority, even when it contradicts our personal beliefs. This is called groupthink. The desire to fit in often overrides independent thought. If our perception of reality is so easily deceived, and our reasoning so prone to biases, a profound question arises: can we truly trust our understanding of the world? This question has intrigued not only scientists, but also philosophers for centuries. One of the earliest to explore this idea was the ancient Greek philosopher Plato. In his Allegory of the Cave, he described people who spend their entire lives in a cave, seeing only the shadows of objects cast by a fire behind them. For them, these shadows are the entirety of reality. But what happens if someone leaves the cave and sees the true world? Plato argued that what we perceive is only a shadow of the truth, while the real nature of existence remains hidden from us. Today, the idea of living in a cave has been reimagined through the lens of simulation theory. This concept suggests that our entire world could be a highly advanced computer program, created by a more advanced civilization. Such theories have gained traction not only among philosophers, but also within scientific fields, including physics and technology. Philosophers have long debated whether the world is objective. For example, Immanuel Kant argued that we can never know things as they are. We only experience them through the filters of our senses and mind. The reality we perceive is a construct of our consciousness. On the other hand, realist philosophers claim that reality exists independently of our perception. However, Even they acknowledge that we can only see fragments of it, like pieces of a vast mosaic. Does a world exist beyond our consciousness? And if so, what is it like? A question that remains unanswered. These ideas aren't just academic musings. They reshape how we see ourselves, how we interact with the world around us, and how we understand our place within it. If reality is subjective, can we ever truly uncover the truth? Perhaps everything we see is merely an illusion crafted by our minds. Or maybe, beyond the visible, there is something greater. We've traveled from simple illusions to profound philosophical questions about the nature of reality. And now, the question looms larger than ever. If our mind and perception are so flawed, can we ever truly understand the world as it is? Perhaps the answer lies not only in what we perceive, but in the questions we ask. As Plato suggested, the path to truth begins with recognizing the limits of our understanding. What if reality is something we create ourselves? What do you think? Your perspective could be a piece of the larger puzzle. Share your thoughts in the comments. Is reality objective? If not, how can we uncover the truth? If this video made you think, give it a like and share it with friends. Who knows? Their ideas might bring us closer to the answer. Subscribe to Mindflux, and let's continue exploring the boundaries of consciousness and reality together.